Born and raised in Wisconsin and dubbed America's architect, Frank Lloyd Wright designed more than 1,000 buildings over the course of his 70 years. An iconic designer of 20th century homes, several of his homes open to the public for tours, even to spend the night in. Emily Byers shares more in our We the People series.
Frank Lloyd Wright is arguably the most famous and celebrated architect in the United States, if not the world.
Born in 1867 near Richland Center, Frank Lloyd Wright is known for his organic architecture.
All of his architecture is really inspired by nature.
The famous architect designing more than 1,000 structures in his lifetime. Finding a Frank Lloyd Wright home on the market is rare, but that's what happened for Michael Dittmer and his brother Gary. Buying this Frank Lloyd Wright home in Two Rivers in 2003. It's known as the Schwartz House, built in 1938.
In his description to the original family in Life magazine, said this house, I think, recognizes American family life for pretty much what it is, a little private club with special privacies, ultra conveniences, and style all the while, as you can see.
Wright designed museums, churches, commercial buildings, homes, all with his own philosophy. His designs so popular you can visit them in 21 different states and even in Japan. Dittmer visiting more than 100 of the designer's homes.
If you visit other Frank Lloyd Wright houses, oftentimes they'll talk about how he blurred the distinction between inside and out, or he brings the outside in, so to speak.
Each home offers its own creative features that capture the eye, some having a few more luxury designs.
One of the unique things about this house is the floor we're standing on is the longest continuously operating radiant floor heating application in the country.
This home has been meticulously maintained.
The bathroom is a brick and wood shower, and these are the original Kohler fixtures.
Oh, original Kohler from 1938?
For 1939, yeah.
The cost to build this home in 1938? $25,000, which would be the equivalent to about a $300,000 to $350,000 home today.
He was famous for designing houses with stained glass windows and for well-to-do people, but he did have a lifelong interest in designing for the middle class. So this was designed for a family of moderate income.
The value of this home now, Dittmer says, is close to $1 million.
And I'm sure Frank Lloyd Wright's name obviously lends a good chunk to that too.
It does. Most of his houses that are for sale around the country right now are in the $2 to $3 million.
Famous for its designer, it's captured the headlines of Vogue, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Vanity Fair, National Geographic, and was even featured in the Netflix show The World's Most Amazing Vacation Rentals. Dittmer says the Schwartz home was booked 286 days last year.
I get asked that question all the time, what's my favorite part of the house? And it's really hard.
Sharing this home with fans of the architect.
I really think it's entering the house, you come in and it's a low ceiling, and you go past that threshold of the balcony there, and it opens up like you're in a cathedral.
And experiencing a night staying in a Frank Lloyd Wright masterpiece. In Two Rivers, Emily Byers, Action 2 News.
And you too can stay in that home with a wood and brick shower. How interesting. I'm intrigued. You can find more information on the listing on our website, WBAY.com/links.